Hello, it's 7 o'clock. You're watching Sky News Breakfast. These are our top stories this morning on Eurovision Day.
Instead, I wrote a song about how you did me wrong. Don't care about the ball. Don't get what you say, yeah.
It's loud, it's brash, but the contest will be a showcase for Ukraine, incorporating its artists, people and scenes from across the war-torn country.
But if you're thinking of setting off to Liverpool by train, think again as train strikes continue and services are badly affected around the country.
Sky News investigates how workers claiming sick pay are being forced into debt, making do with a fraction of what they need.
I ended up having just some gravy and some bread for dinner just because you just couldn't afford it. It was either a roof over your head or food, and it's just, no one should have to choose.
Rishi Sunak under attack from former Home Secretary Priti Patel, who's accusing him of leading the managed decline of the Conservative Party. Love Island winner Finlay Tapp tells us how he's encouraging young footballers to come up with a plan B in case they're let go by their club. The race for the top four is heating up in the Premier League as Manchester United boss Erik ten Hag fights to keep his team ahead of fifth place Liverpool. And at 1:45, we'll take a look at today's papers with National World Cities Editor-in-Chief Nancy Fielder and senior reporter for The Eye, Benjamin Butterworth. Hello, a very good morning and welcome to Sky News Breakfast. As Liverpool prepares for the biggest Eurovision party of all time, the row continues about whether Ukraine's President Zelensky should be allowed to address the grand final. He's got the backing of Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer and former PM Boris Johnson. But organisers say he won't be allowed to speak because of concerns that it would politicise the contest. Well, now the Mayor of Liverpool, Steve Rotherham, is trying to find a way of giving him a platform. Meanwhile, excitement is building in a city where music runs through its core, and it's promising to pay homage to Ukraine throughout the event, as our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer reports.
Belting out Eurovision classics in the street. If you're a fan, what more could you want? The UK's entrant May Muller itching to get started.
I thought I was excited before, but now I'm here, I'm even more excited, and I feel like I'm just ready to go now. It's so much build-up, and then now I'm like, it's basically here.
For the first time, we can show you this, a sneak peek at rehearsals and what the 160 million viewers expected to tune in will see.
The production is immense. Imagine being on the lighting desk with 79,000 lighting cues programmed in. It's no spoiler to say this is going to be spectacular.
Our concept and the architecture of our set revolves around a big hug, as if Liverpool is welcoming the Ukraine, Europe and the world with big open arms.
Incorporating Ukraine, its music and people is central to what you'll see in the show. But Rishi Sunak, seemingly wanting in on the action after hosting his own Eurovision reception, wading into the decision of organisers not to let President Zelensky make an address over concerns the event could become too politicised, insisting the values of what the Ukrainians are fighting for are not political, they're fundamental. Eurovision veterans Jedward think he might have a point.
Yeah, I think it'd be like a great way to thank the UK for hosting it for Ukraine, and I feel like the president, it's not so political. I think he just wants to share his love and thank the UK for doing such a great job.
The show will include 11 Ukrainian acts, opening with last year's winners Kalush Orchestra.
We would like to say, please vote for our Ukrainian band. Don't forget about Ukraine and keep supporting us.
But this wouldn't be a party without the prospect of some skirt ripping.
None of us will ever forget. You know, we can remember every minute of it, and it'll be the same for them. But it's bigger, better, more extraordinary, more flamboyant, more colourful, more fantastic now than it ever was.
Get ready to sing, dance and bask in Eurovision and all its camp pop glory. Liverpool is laying on quite the party. Katie Spencer, Sky News in Liverpool.
Well, let's go live to our correspondent, Becky Cottrell, who's at the Eurovision Village in Liverpool for us this morning. So, Becky, to what extent are we likely to see Ukraine in this contest tonight and images from Ukraine? And are we likely to see President Zelensky at all?
Ukraine will be heavily involved in the production of this in terms of images, in terms of the opening performances, but we know we won't be seeing a video message from President Zelensky. In not wanting to make this event political, the organisers have very much made the conversation about it a political one. Now, Liverpool's Mayor Steve Rotherham has said he does want to provide a platform for Ukraine's president. What could that look like? It's unclear, but the council are running a lot of this event on the ground, including that giant screen behind me where thousands have been queuing to get in and watch the acts rehearsing. But that wouldn't have the same impact as seeing Ukraine's president addressing that final. 160 million people expected to tune in. And we'll have what we always have from Eurovision, 26 acts battling it out. And in true Eurovision style, there's everything from heavy metal to ballads to my own personal favourite, Austria's entry, which is a bizarre number about being haunted by the ghost of Edgar Allan Poe. That one is opening the show tonight. Sweden, very much the favourite. Finland also providing a very strong contender, but we'll have to wait and see how it goes on the night.
Of course. Yes, thanks very much indeed, Becky. But if you're planning to set off to Liverpool by train, think again. There's another train strike today. And for more on that story, our correspondent Aisha Zaheed is at London's Euston Station. And Aisha, of course, yesterday was a strike by ASLEF workers. Today it's the RMT, isn't it?
Morning, Anna, that's right. And that's what the problem is. We've got two different strikes almost running in tandem with each other. Of course, it was ASLEF, the drivers' union, that was striking yesterday. That affected 16 operators. That's had knock-on effects spilling over into this morning. And then this morning, RMT have started their strike action. It's affecting 14 operators. Now, all of this, of course, comes on the weekend where we've got the Eurovision final tonight and then the Women's FA Cup final tomorrow. Government ministers pointed fingers at the union, saying that this had been a targeted attack on Eurovision, preventing people from travelling for that final. But the unions say that this simply isn't the case. Of course, all of it comes down to this long-running pay dispute and dispute over conditions that they've got running with the government. No breakthrough moments there yet. RMT have rejected a 9% pay rise over 2 years, and ASLEF rejecting a 4% pay rise a year for the next 2 years. So strike action continues, disruption continues, though. Merseyrail say that they're not going to be affected, but if you're travelling to the Eurovision final from further afield, there may well be problems. So the message from operators is to check if services are running before you set off.
OK, Aisha, thanks very much indeed. Now, Rishi Sunak is under attack this morning from a familiar name. His former cabinet colleague, the ex-Home Secretary Priti Patel, has lashed out at the Prime Minister, accusing him of being responsible for what she says is the Conservative Party's managed decline. So let's get more on that from our political correspondent, Rob Powell, who's in Westminster this morning. It's quite a fierce attack, this, isn't it, from Priti Patel, Rob? So what's behind it?
I think what's behind it is a degree of discontent about the local election results last week and generally as well about the direction the Conservative Party's been going in. Priti Patel is going to make these comments at a conference organised by a group called the Conservative Democratic Organisation. Ostensibly a group that wants to give more power to Tory members, although a lot of them are also very, very loyal to Boris Johnson, and if we're being honest, would probably like to see him back in Downing Street. Now, Priti Patel will say that Rishi Sunak risks presiding over the managed decline of the Tory party. She'll say that he was part of a group that took down a vote-winning political giant who was on course to secure a record-breaking 5th consecutive general election win for the party, of course referring to Boris Johnson, and will say that some colleagues in Westminster over the last year have done a better job of damaging the Conservatives than the opposition. So Clearly, this indicates that in parts of the Conservative Party anyway, there is a degree of anxiety about the direction in which the party's going, about those results a week ago, about Rishi Sunak's overall policy agenda. In terms of what actual direct impact it will have on the Prime Minister, though, I don't think at the moment there is necessarily a tangible threat to his premiership. I think most Conservative MPs, quite frankly, are quite sick of the chaos and are prepared to give Rishi Sunak a little bit more time to try and make advances on some of the economic challenges he faces and challenges with the NHS and obviously with migration as well. So, yes, an indication of the anxiety that is still there within the Conservative Party and the fact that people are not afraid of speaking out publicly about it. But for now, I don't think it poses a tangible threat to Rishi Sunak.
OK, Rob, thanks very much indeed. Now, many people living on sick pay are sinking into debt, struggling to afford even the basics. That's according to new analysis shared exclusively with Sky News. The government wants to encourage sick and disabled people back into the workforce, but it's failed to bring in promised reforms to the system of statutory sick pay. Amanda Akas reports.
For all its seaside delights, Margate in Kent is one of the most deprived parts of the UK. Many families struggle to make ends meet, and falling ill is often a headlong plunge into poverty.
I'm in so much debt because of it. I'm about £3,000 in debt from borrowing people, getting loans, because I couldn't afford to live, couldn't get my money, couldn't get my rent.
Kyra, a shop assistant, spent months unable to work while waiting for surgery on her ankle when the metal screws holding it together after a childhood injury snapped. But statutory sick pay barely covered half her rent.
It's just not enough. I ended up having just some gravy and some bread for dinner just because you just couldn't afford it. It was either a roof over your head or food, and it's just, no one should have to choose.
Christopher has just been signed off with depression from his job as a head chef, but statutory sick pay is only a quarter of his normal income, and the stress is making his condition worse.
I don't sleep. I feel anxious most of the time anyway, and this has just made me feel even more anxious. I'm just worried about the whole situation, like with the amount of money that you actually don't get.
While many employers choose to be more generous with their sick pay, a third of workers only get the legal minimum.
Statutory sick pay is currently £109.40 a week, which works out at around a third of the full-time minimum wage. You only start getting it on the fourth day in a row you've been off with illness, and if you earn less than £123 a week on average, your employer doesn't have to pay it, meaning 2 million of the country's lowest paid workers receive nothing at all.
The campaign group Safe Sick Pay want to see higher rates paid from day one extended to all workers. Ministers originally pledged to make improvements in 2019. This former Justice Secretary says the time for action is now.
We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who, through no fault of their own, might get ill and who end up staying off work for longer because of the disincentives that are caused at the moment by the lack of reach of statutory sick pay. It seems to me that a reform to statutory sick pay is overdue.
The government say they're implementing a range of initiatives to help people with health issues stay in work, and there's a strong safety net for those with long-term conditions. But none of that helps Christopher now.
It's not just me that's suffering, it's everybody else in my family that's got to suffer me being ill.
Dealing with a diagnosis is hard enough. For too many people, it comes with financial fear too. Amanda Akas, Sky News, Margate.
A former footballer is guiding young players and encouraging them to think about a plan B if they're dropped by their club. Finley Tabb played for MK Dons, but was let go in 2019. He later found success winning Love Island. He spoke to our sports presenter, Jackie Trout, about living through a devastating career setback.
As soon as they sort of said they didn't want me next year, it was like you just shut off and you don't want to hear the reasons, you just hear they don't want me. And then I sort of walked into the changing room. I didn't even really speak to the other guys in there, and I sort of went home.
Did you cry?
Yeah, it was tough. It's never too early to start preparing yourself for the worst outcome. Whether it's an injury, whether it's you get released, whatever it is, your football career will come to an end. That might be 35 years old after a full, long, successful career. And it's just trying to prepare yourself for what next. What do I go into? And I think it's important that the boys, they think, what other passions have I got? What other things could I enjoy doing that'll earn me money, that will give me a career that I can sort of strive and become the best in that field.
Do you think football clubs then don't do enough right now to help those young players? And do they do enough afterwards when they release young players?
I wish there was more in place for preparing boys for the backup option, i.e. you can choose whatever you wanted to, what qualifications you wanted to do alongside football. So I think that's massively important to do more for that. And afterwards, sort of the Love Island thing, we had sort of a welfare officer always checking up on us. It almost became annoying. It was that persistent. It was, you know, are you okay, this, that, just, you know, if you ever need anything, contact us. So whether or not that's something that clubs can do.
Did you feel embarrassed at the time when it happened to you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, big time. Although it's nothing to be ashamed of because of the percentages are so small, everyone goes through it. You do have that little bit of you, I guess, that would be like, oh, they're going to know that I don't play football. I'm going to be seen as almost a failure in that sense. But I think that's a stigma we need to shake, in that one setback isn't a failed mission. It's just a little setback and you can go in any direction that you want.
And you can hear a longer version of Jackie's interview with Finlay Tapp at 9:30 this morning, so do stay with us for that. Now, the new post-coronation photos have been released, and one shows King Charles and his two heirs, the Prince of Wales and Prince George. The King is wearing his robe of estate and imperial state crown, and the other, which you can see here, features the King and Queen. Oh, well, there's the one I was just talking about, and then the other one is with the pages of honour and ladies in attendance. The shots were taken by Hugh Bernard, who photographed Charles and Camilla's wedding in 2005. Jackie's here with the sport, and I should be talking about your Finlay Tapp interview, which was brilliant, but I am completely distracted by sunshine in the weather.
No, sunshine, what?
I know.
Yeah, he was really good. Yeah, very nice chap, very candid about his experiences of being, dropped. 10 years at a football club from the age of 9, and the interview to tell you they don't want you is 10 minutes. He's like, bye, and that's it. You're out the door, and that's the end of that.
That's the question.
Well, that's the question, and and then what? And for a lot of players, their families, it's devastating because all their dreams are pinned on being a professional footballer, and so few of them make it. The ones that do make it very, 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 very well. That is all your sport for now. I will see you in an hour's time.
You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Coming up, we'll be speaking to the Government Minister, Stuart Andrew, at Eurovision after the break. Well, it's Eurovision Day, of course, and we're joined from Liverpool now by Stuart Andrew, who's Minister in the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. So a very good morning to you, and I do want to talk about Eurovision in just a moment. But before we get on to that, a couple of stories around today that I want to ask you about. Firstly, comments by the former Conservative Home Secretary, Priti Patel, today, saying that Rishi Sunak needs to offer more hope and optimism for Conservatism, or, she says, he risks presiding over a managed decline of the party and defeat at the next election. Is she right?
So, I have a marginal seat. I am reliant on the grassroots of the party to help me. They are determined, as I am, and I think most people within the party, to support the Prime Minister in the endeavours that he has to try and grow the economy and tackle the issues that are the people's priorities. So I think what they want us to do is to unite, to work together, tackle those issues, and then go on to work towards winning the next election.
So comments like this from Priti Patel unhelpful then? Are they going to be seen as sour grapes from aggrieved Boris Johnson supporters?
Look, I'm not, it's a privilege for me to work with my colleagues. I'm not going to criticise them. It's right that we have discussion about the direction of the party, but I think what is really crucial is that we focus on those issues that the Prime Minister has rightly identified, because that's what people tell us they want us to deal with, and that is what we will be focusing on.
Well, yes, but some Tory members might have some sympathy with her views, mightn't they? They may say, we didn't actually vote for Rishi Sunak as leader, and we've now just seen him presiding over terrible local election losses with 1,000 seats gone.
Well, they were difficult elections, of course they are. And, you know, I know from my own constituency that hard-working councillors had a really difficult night. But they equally want us to focus on the issues that matter to the people of this country. That is what we are doing. That is what we need to concentrate on and then work towards the next election. It's great to have debate, but let's also focus and unite behind those key issues so that we can work towards victory in the next election.
Do you think he does need to work on a more conservative vision for the country rather than just spending his time trying to fix crises and problems?
Well, look, we've undoubtedly gone through a very difficult time, and it was right that we were there to support people through those cost of living issues. But now he is focusing very rightly on making sure that we are growing the economy. That's what people want. They want security. They want to see better standards of living, and that is what we are focusing on doing.
Well, meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer is promising a vision. He's talking about a radical general election vision. He says that the Tories are being unconservative, that they're failing to understand people's need for stability, order and security. And that might ring true for some Tories, mightn't it?
Well, I'm afraid I've heard Keir Starmer relaunch himself so many times that I've lost count. And when I speak to people on the doorstep, I have to say that he's not particularly resonating with them. He can do whatever he likes. The fact is that we are concentrating on growing the economy, making sure that we cut inflation, deal with the small boats and make sure that the NHS waiting lists are reduced. So these are key priorities of the people I speak to in my constituency, and it's right that we focus on those, and we will continue to do so.
A quick thought on how you think that's going so far. The Bank of England this week has revised its projections for inflation up by the end of the year. And also, the latest growth figures yesterday showed that in March, the economy shrank by 0.3%. So those two priorities that you highlight there aren't going so well at the moment, are they?
Well, because we have gone through an incredibly difficult period. There's no doubt about that. We haven't made the promise that this will be sorted out overnight, but we are on a plan. The budget that the Chancellor announced specifically looked at many of those issues to help us to grow the economy, and those are the issues that we are focusing on, rightly so.
OK, and one other issue that I did want to ask you about, because there are a number of head teachers as well as parents who are concerned about it, and this is the SATs test, and one paper in the SATs test, this is for Year 6 pupils who are 10 and 11. They say that was extremely hard. I think one head teacher is talking about the test including some GCSE-level questions. What's your take on this? Was it too hard?
So, I mean, my view is that I want all children in this country to have the very best education possible, because it is the foundation for their whole lives, and testing children and encouraging their skills is an important element of their education. I think, therefore, the tests seem to me to be fine, and we need to continue to do that. There's a lot of work going on in education to raise our standards so that we have the best educated children to compete in a very difficult global economy.
To turn our attention to Eurovision, you are in Liverpool, of course, and we've seen the Prime Minister and Boris Johnson as well both express disappointment that President Zelensky isn't going to be able to address the contest tonight. First of all, do you agree with them? Would you like to see an address from him?
I think it is disappointing that he's not able to make that address. That is a decision for the EBU. It is their contest. But actually, if you come to Liverpool, what you see everywhere you go are great, contributions from Ukraine, from Ukrainian artists. You cannot escape the fact that this, although this contest is being held here in Liverpool, you cannot escape the fact that people know that it should be held in Ukraine. And I spent time yesterday with the Ukrainian ambassador and the culture ministers from Ukraine, and they were frankly overwhelmed by what they had seen. Liverpool have put on an amazing show and really made sure that Ukrainian influence is felt in every element of this festival and competition here.
We understand that the Mayor of Liverpool, Steve Rotherham, has said that he's going to also speak to the Ukrainian ambassador and the Mayor of Lviv, who I think are both there, to discuss what could be done about providing some sort of platform for President Zelensky. What have you heard about that, and what form could that potentially take?
So I was speaking to both the ambassador and the minister last night about options. My understanding is the president is very, very busy, but he has already sent a message saying how grateful he is to the United Kingdom and to Liverpool for hosting this show on their behalf. And I think everybody here now is just focused on ensuring that this contest continues to be as successful as it has been all week. And, you know, I can get a sense from the people here now that they're just wanting to get on with the party.
I'm sure they are, but there'll be no sight of President Zelensky at all tonight, is your take on it, yeah?
That's my understanding. That's a decision the EBU have made. But, you know, despite that, Liverpool City Council, the Combined Authority and us in DCMS have worked together to make sure that there are lots of Ukrainian things to see here, lots of cultural elements that have been installed for people to look at. And there will, of course, be mention of the fact that we are hosting this on behalf of Ukraine in the contest this evening.
OK, and very briefly, who's going to win?
Well, of course, the United Kingdom, but I think also Scandinavian countries, from what I can see from the reaction of the audience, they're going to get a good night too. So who knows, it's a Eurovision Song Contest, anything can happen.
That's so true. Stuart Andrew, thanks very much indeed for your time. We appreciate it. Now, members of the RMT union are striking today in England, affecting services across 14 companies. It follows industrial action by ASLEF train drivers yesterday, which brought much of the network to a halt. Well, the RMT General Secretary, Mick Lynch, joins me now. A very good morning to you, Mick Lynch. First of all, just how much support do you expect to have for the walkout today? Just how disruptive will this strike be?
Well, our members will be out all over the country. They'll be on picket lines up and down the rail network. We've had a very strong mandate to renew our action in the last week or so, a 9-1 vote on a heavy turnout. So our members are up and down the picket lines, taking the action as instructed by the union and as voted for by them. And so the action is solid, and it will be as long as this campaign goes on.
People watching will know that this dispute has been going on for a long time. How close are you now to a resolution?
Well, we had an offer put to us, the second or third offer, I think, in this process, which we have declined to accept because the stipulations that were put on it were not acceptable to our people. We had a good conversation about that throughout the union. So we're looking for a fresh offer from the company. We're looking for a new set of negotiations to start. We haven't got a settlement for the drivers, as you saw yesterday with the ASLEF strike, and we haven't got that for the other grades in the RMT strikes as well. So there's a lot of anger in the rail industry at the minute. Both unions are still campaigning. Their members are voting in heavy numbers to continue the action. So there's a lot of strength for feeling, and it's up to the government to unblock this dispute, because they have the final say on what is proposed at the table. In their contracts with these companies, they stipulate what the negotiating position is. They stipulate what the offers are, and those offers simply aren't good enough at the minute. They don't recognise the cost of living crisis, where inflation has gone, and what they want from our members in terms of giving up their terms and conditions are simply not acceptable. So there's a long way to go, but we're available for dialogue and negotiation at any time.
The government says they want you to put this latest offer to a ballot of members. Why aren't you doing that?
Because it's not acceptable. It doesn't meet the demands in the dispute. They know that. They knew that when it was offered. And certainly when they clarified what they meant by it, what they want us to do is call off the dispute and then go into another set of negotiations without any leverage at the table. And we simply can't do that. You don't disarm yourself halfway through a campaign. And they're asking us to call off all our action to declare that the dispute is over when only half of the issues have been negotiated. So that's not possible. We're prepared to talk to them and we're prepared to go into a process, but we're not prepared to call off all of our action and declare the dispute over when the issues have not been settled. So they've put a lot of money into this dispute. They've spent over 1.25 billion on this dispute, and they've lost that money for the economy and for the railway based on a dogma. What we need is a practical solution to the dispute so that we can get the railways back to normal, and the government needs to show a bit of goodwill and flexibility and stop wasting the public's money on this campaign, propping up private sector train operators while they're making profit. Our members are losing money and the public are disrupted. So we need a change of stance from the government immediately.
So what are the key differences in this dispute from the one with Network Rail, where you did ballot members and yet you're not on this one? So what are the differences?
Well, in Network Rail, they made an improved offer. It's not the same offer. The drivers have only been offered 8% over these 2 years, and they haven't had a pay rise for 4 years. Our members have been offered 9% over those 4 years because we haven't had a pay deal for such a long time. But in this one, they are saying to us we have to go into another round of negotiations after we declared the dispute over. So what the demand was 2 weeks ago was that we say that the dispute has been concluded when the issues have not been negotiated, whereas in Network Rail, the issues were settled. They moved forward with their modernising maintenance plan. They enhanced the offer in cash terms, so it's a superior offer to the one that's available to train operating companies. They put a travel facilities deal in it, and there were new contracts of employment for many of our members that have got the potential to improve their earnings over the rest of their career. So it was a completely different offer for Network Rail, and it was a different picture. The Network Rail moves in a way that our members could accept, but the train operating companies have not been allowed to do that by the government.
OK. So if the train companies drop the request to get rid of your strike mandate, would you put that to the ballot? Is the rest of the deal sound, essentially?
Well, the devil's... No, because the Network Rail deal was a better deal. It had more cash in the offer than this one. It's in the technicalities of the way the deal works. So what we need to do is get around the table and get the document written down in a way that is clear. It was unclear in its first version, and that broke down because of the interpretation. So we'll be talking to the companies next week to see if they want to get around the table and thresh out a deal. If we get a deal that is clear in its meaning and we're allowed to keep or enabled to keep our mandate going so that we've got leverage at the negotiating table, perhaps we can move forward. But the devil's always in the detail of these documents, and we'll have to see what it says to see if we can move forward. But what's going on at the moment is the government is wasting everybody's time and money rather than allowing the companies to negotiate and get a reasonable prospect of a deal. Everybody's been put in a straitjacket, really, so that we can't move this dispute forward. So hopefully we can do that in the next week or two.
OK, well, Mick Lynch, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed. Let's take a look at the weather. Back to both of you. And Ben, we're kicking off with you this hour, and we dealt with a lot of the front pages last time around. And on the front of your newspaper was a call by Priti Patel, or criticism really of the Prime Minister. And The Guardian picks up on this group that she's part of, and there's a big conference today, isn't there? So what's The Guardian saying?
Yeah, so this is the Conservative Democratic Organisation, which is a group, frankly, I hadn't heard of until very recently. And The Guardian makes a very good point that the people who are speaking at this conference today, it's not just Priti Patel, it's Jacob Rees-Mogg, it's Nadine Dorries. Now, what do they have in common? They're all pretty fond of that guy who used to be Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. And so the suggestion they're making, which the organisers of this group have rather unconvincingly denied, is that actually this big conference of the Tory right today is about getting Boris Johnson back in power, back as Prime Minister, because this is basically all of their backers, several of the people that were funders of Boris Johnson's political career, including Aaron Banks, who was a big funder of the Brexit side of things and used to fund UKIP in the past. They're all involved in this group. And I think that, you know, when we saw those local election results and Rishi Sunak lost well over 1,000 council seats, and there was a question for the last week of, well, is there not a move to get rid of him? That's what usually happens if a leader doesn't do well. I think this is it. And And this group that's got proper money, big names, I think is going to be the vehicle to try and get Boris Johnson back into Downing Street. I'm not sure how well that will go, quite frankly, but I think that's the attempt.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, could they have a chance if Rishi Sunak's performance doesn't improve? Might they have more traction?
I mean, the parliamentary Tory party doesn't look like en masse it's looking to get rid of Rishi Sunak. I think that would be a gross exaggeration. And also, Boris Johnson's just bought a £4 million house. He's getting, he's made £1 million in 1 quarter from speeches and all the rest of it. I think he's probably raking the money in, but waiting for that moment when he can strike. And I suspect this group is trying to put it in the place where that will be plausible when it gets there.
When the ball comes out from the back of the scrum
yeah,
or something.
He's going to be ready to... Oh, I was doing tennis, but I think...
Oh, yeah. There definitely aren't scrums in tennis, or you're watching the wrong kind of tennis.
It's why I'm not a sports correspondent, I think.
Definitely not. OK, Nancy, take us to The Guardian. A lot of attention on Eurovision, of course, today, not least because it's being hosted by the UK and the reason why it's being hosted by the UK. There's an article here in The Guardian.
Yes, of course, it's been a very long time coming, getting Eurovision back to the UK. It's in Liverpool. I mean, Liverpool is an incredible city, and it's really, really thrown all its weight behind it and been really building up to this for weeks and months. But obviously, it should never have been in Liverpool originally. It should have been in the Ukraine. So this is a really interesting article about sort of the politics of it. Now, you did a piece earlier about how the Ukrainian president hasn't been invited to give a speech or send a video message. However, Eurovision is always quite overtly political, but not politicians standing there talking to you, but it comes through in the music, it comes through in the costumes, it comes through in the dance, it comes through in everything. So I think we are going to have a massive show of support for Ukraine tonight. Obviously, they are the co-hosts, even though really, sadly, they can't host it in their own country. And The Guardian saying there's a very good chance that the Ukraine will win. Eurovision is also well known for perhaps not the best musicians winning, but political allies supporting each other. So it's just going to be a really, really big celebration and bringing the Ukraine back to the front pages and back into sort of everybody's thoughts, because it does fade away, doesn't it, after a year of war, sadly. It doesn't for them, but it has for us. So I think this is a brilliant opportunity to celebrate, but also to look at an ongoing situation which shows no end of war, sadly.
No, that's right. And you pick up on this theme, Benjamin. You've written an article in The Eye, haven't you, that talks about exactly what it means to Ukraine.
So I interviewed the lead singer of Kalush Orchestra, which is the Ukrainian rap band that won Eurovision. And I spoke to them yesterday and I put that question about should Zelensky be allowed to speak. Now, very diplomatically, they just wouldn't answer the question because Eurovision rules are really strict about politics. In fact, if you roll the clock back 1 year, they wanted to keep Russia in the contest because they said removing them would have been a political act. But then everyone else in the contest said, well, we're not going to turn up if Russia's there. But what they want, and I'm not sure how likely this is to happen, but they say that if the UK wins tonight, which would be amazing, and Mae Muller is our brilliant singer, but if she wins tonight, they want to do another swap, and so that we would give Eurovision to Ukraine, a free Ukraine in 2024. Now, I think that we're probably not going to win. I don't know. It seems unlikely. Blame me if we lose. And also, I think Ukraine might still, sadly, not be in a state to host such a large contest. But I think, the other thing that the lead singer said is that it's been such a morale boost. And you can only imagine, it must feel, as Nancy rightly points out, that the world is forgetting about the plight, that it's becoming old news, because you constantly new ways to get it back there. And the Kalush Orchestra said to me that it has boosted the morale so much to see the solidarity in Liverpool and in Britain since they arrived. So, I think we should be proud of what we're doing and how we're helping and doing this with Ukraine today.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a very uplifting contest anyway, isn't it? But it'll have that extra layer of it. Are you all set?
Oh. Like most gay men in this country, I love Eurovision. I'm just mad.
Have you got a party all planned? And...
I will be doing. Yeah, I might have. Well, you see, you always want to have nibbles and drinks from all around the different countries, don't you? I genuinely think that's the best part of it.
I hadn't even thought of that. I said obviously, but I was just thinking nibbles and drinks. I just got stuck on that.
Drinks,
but from each country, rude. Although that's not a bad idea. Anyway, let's move on. To the story, this is in the Mail, I think, Nancy. Be fair to fat workers, New York tells bosses. So talk us through it.
Yeah, this is a really interesting, ongoing situation in America where more than 40% of the population are obese. And this is a new bill that's making its way through the legislations in New York City. which means you can't legally discriminate against fat people. So this covers all sorts of things off. It's just a fact that overweight people are paid less, particularly if you're an overweight woman, you more likely to get sacked. Everything's going against you, really. So this will make that illegal. It's an interesting one, though, because it goes beyond the workplace. So criticisers are saying it also means if you get a taxi and there isn't a seatbelt extender, well, that's discrimination. You can sue them. If you go to a restaurant and there isn't a seat that's comfortably big enough for you, you can sue them. So it's a very, very interesting one. Obviously, everybody should be protected from discrimination. Nobody should be paid less for any physical reason. But actually, this is a massive, massive issue. Perhaps the wrong word. This is an important issue that is being discussed, but is also going to cause all sorts of controversies. So I think it's one to watch and one that possibly might be heading our way at some point in the future.
OK, yeah, a really interesting one. And we don't have time for The Star, whose front page has a typical kind of humorous slant on what's actually a serious story. So, Benjamin, I'm going to encourage you to bring that one back
I'll bring it back
in the next hour, and we'll talk about it then, because we're out of time this hour. But good to see you both, Nancy and Benjamin, and we'll see you again in an hour. In the meantime, still to come on Sky News Breakfast, we'll have a live update from Liverpool as its mayor speaks of trying to get Ukraine's president on the platform.